But you were going to give us some info on the Remain in Mexico policy.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief
Oh,
about
take your time.
the
We have a
both
half hour.
it's such a morass of like legal things and political economy. But for those that are not aware, so Trump instituted a what's commonly called Remain in Mexico. On the official name is the Migrant Protection Protocols, and there's this portion of immigration law that allows the executive branch basically to remove people to an adjoining country if they entered. So in this case, Mexico, right? So a bunch of people from moving up from Central America reach the border. The law allows the secretary, as long as that the neighboring country agrees, as long as Mexico agrees in this case, that you can just keep people there and not allow them to seek asylum in the United States. So, Trump institutes this policy. Of course, there have been awful humanitarian consequences as a fallout from this. You have massive, basically, quasi refugee camps that have cropped up all around the border. Terrible, terrible conditions, kidnappings, crime, assaults, death. I mean, just it's a humanitarian crisis. And so, Biden obviously gets elected to, a lot of backclapping and celebration with the idea that, right, that he was going to end this program. And initially sort of leaves it in place. Um, but then, decides at some point that's like, all right, we're going to get rid of this, right? And once again, it was posed as this kind of, well, this is a humanitarian crisis. We can't, under Trump policies, we can't let this continue. So goes through the administrative process of revoking the Remain in Mexico program. But in the interim, then Texas, together with a number of other states, actually sue the federal government and say, no, you can't end this program because the law says that you have to detain migrants. And so this has wound its way all the way up to the Supreme Court in April, where there was a series, lengthy oral argument that if you're willing to endure such things, is interesting commentary because while the government's position out of the gate sort of acknowledges the humanitarian piece, things quickly shift to being exclusively focused on who gets to make this call, right? About what the law says about in terms of controlling the human beings at the border. Um, and so in this case, it hinges on this debate about whether or not you can end this god awful program because the law allows you either one of two or one of three options, depending on which side of the fence, the legal fence you fall on, pun intended. You can detain people, detain everyone that comes in. The law says you shall detain, so you can detain everyone. You can remove them back to the country that they came from, or the country that's contiguous to the U.S. where they're trying to enter. That was Texas's position, is that those are the only two options, right? You can either detain everybody or you can keep them outside of the country and make them go through the asylum process abroad. Or, the government was saying, well, no, we can actually, split the middle and allow a certain number of people in. So everyone acknowledges, right, that there's no detention capacity to handle these tens of thousands of migrants that are showing up at the border every month. Even if you wanted to jail all of them, there isn't the money, there isn't the space, there's no way to do that, right? And so that's why Trump had instituted this Remain in Mexico policy, is to just keep them on the other side of the border because there's no way to detain them. But I guess the essential point is, right, this debate, this whole back and forth around the legality of it is really a question of control, right? It's like, who gets to control migration in this case and how it's controlled, right? It has nothing whatsoever to do with ending what is actually a god awful humanitarian crisis and a series of terrible practices that even under just basic bourgeois rights in terms of asylum and stuff, like violates even those most basic things. Um, and so then it becomes an interesting question, especially juxtaposed against Roe now, and the labor shortages that we see in the country. Because on the one hand, we talked about last time I was on and did a whole bunch of talking on the book, that it's like all things having to do with the border are really fundamental questions of control, right? Of controlling labor flows in and out of the country. So if you look around and you say, oh, well, there's this massive labor shortage in the U.S. And in the instance of Roe, like leading up to that point, immigrants have been filling in, basically helping beat back the declining birth rate and keeping the whole social system afloat. So why now all of a sudden are we having this debate about control over the border, who gets to do it, how it gets done? And at the end of the day, right, like, sure, there are probably more immediate needs long-term needs in terms of how are we going to fix the replacement rate? Like, how are we going to make sure the population continues to grow and that the economy keeps chugging along, right? How are we going to fill all of these jobs that so many migrants end up taking at much lower pace? You know, you're able to extract so much more surplus value from people that you can more readily exploit based on their legal status. But at the end of the day, right, the entire debate about MPP, the entire debate about Title 42, which is a public health law that allows the president to unilaterally just remove anybody from the border that it deems as the executive can deem anyone a public health threat, and remove them from the country, not even allow them entry. All of that then is really just questions of control, right? It's like we're not actually talking about the horrible humanitarian things, you know, violations that are happening in these camps, or the fact that, you know, at this point, thousands and thousands of people have been removed without any kind of judicial hearing under Title 42 and sent back to their home countries, including, you know, Mexico, Cuba, bunch of the Central American countries, right? But then meanwhile, you have Ukrainians showing up in Mexico, actually looking to get into the country seeking asylum. And because we have a political enemy in Russia, they're working on a brand new process just for Ukrainians to shoot right through all of this thing. And it's not to say, right, that we shouldn't also be opening our doors to Ukrainians, but rather to say that this process, when the executive, or really when the state wants to open the doors, when it's convenient, either for politics, right, in Ukraine's case, or for economy, when things are floundering, it can do so, right? So this entire debate that's unfolding at the level of the Supreme Court is not really a debate about whether or not there is some kind of significant public interest at stake, but whether or not there's a significant capitalist interest at stake.
Well, there's something that we kind of mentioned on the show, and maybe we can talk about this a little bit more since we have a little bit of time. I'm seeing a Haitian population even here on this side of Mexico, here in the Baja region. And can you explain what the deal was with the Haitian refugees, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, you know, Haiti, because, you know, the West has been so successful in some cases in destabilizing the country, has had, you know, a large migration pattern through Central America and up, and of course, post earthquake, you know, post assassination, right? Like that population has only grown. And I mean, it was not, I don't even think it was a year ago. I think it was like 6 months ago. All of those god awful images surfaced of Custom and Border Patrol agents literally whipping from horseback, whipping Haitian migrants um, in and around the border. And so again, it's like there's nothing preventing the administration or preventing the state from, if it really saw a humanitarian issue, from addressing that, but instead has left, just again, all of these people hanging out on the other side of the border. And of course, like the rhetoric around that, even from sort of the progressive lib kind of NGOs, if you will, is like, oh, this is all, you know, racialized issues. And I have no doubt that there's probably a racial component to all of it. But in the end, right, I think that it's like there's just nothing politically or economically expedient right now for the administration to allow population of Central Americans or Cubans or Haitians in, or even Afghanistan, right? We have a number of Afghanis showing up at the border as well. Whereas, Ukraine pops off, and I mean, like that, temporary protected status is announced. We start getting all of these processes in place to make sure that they can, fast track into the country and get asylum.
What's particularly interesting, particularly in the case of Haiti and some of these other countries, is that when the United States was exigent in its necessity to destabilize those governments, whether it was because they were viewed to have administrations that were unfriendly to the goals of the United States, whether it would be imperialism or capitalism, or whether or not there were resources in those countries that the United States felt that was more efficacious to extract if it was able to sidestep those administrations, the United States had no problem inviting itself to get involved in the political processes of these countries like Haiti and Central and Latin America. But when that type of activity causes a blowback, that the destabilization renders citizens having to escape the carnage caused by those kind of policy interventions, there's no recourse given to those citizens who are a victim of the particular types of ways in which the United States is intervening in their homeland in the first place. Unless, of course, you're Ukraine and Russia is the bête noire of the moment, and we need to have a particular silver bullet to make you seem like all of America has to genuflect to solve your problems because it makes the Russians look bad.
Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to hit like and subscribe on your way out. You can catch the live stream of This Is Revolution every Tuesday through Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific Time and Saturday, 9 a.m. Pacific Time. This is Revolution.